going up as well. And recently, the Secretary of Labor in the U.S. and the Minister of Industry in Canada have both made, well, fairly tepid comments about the conduct of corporations laying off workers when their profits are skyrocketing. And I just want to hear your comments on that.
Well, first of all, layoffs is the least of it. I mean, for about 20 years now, wages in the United States, again, I only know the detailed figures for the United States and Europe. I don't know them for Canada. But in the United States, at least, let me talk about that. I don't think it's much different here. Around the early 70s, wages started to real income started to stagnate. And by around 1980, it started to decline. If you take the median wage, half below, it's been declining fairly steadily since around 1980. That continued right through the Clinton recovery. The Clinton years, the recovery was, in fact, the growth was faster than during the Reagan years, but it was unprecedented in that wages kept going down. So I think something like, if I remember, 95% or so of families, some very high number, lost family income from 1989, when the recession started, through 1993, which is after the recovery, and it's the last year for which we have figures, and it's probably still going down. For what they call unskilled workers, which means like 70 to 75% of the workforce, they've lost about 20% or so of income since about 1980. That's the core of this, angry white male phenomena and so on, what Buchanan's appealing to. For college graduates, wages started going down around 1987 after the full effect of the Reaganite social changes hit, and they're still going down. So layoffs is one aspect of it, but the other aspect is just a general collapse, a general attack on working people across a very broad spectrum. And at the same time, corporate profits are just breaking all records. If you read Fortune and Business Week and so on, they can't even find the adjectives anymore to describe how stupendous and dazzling and so on it is. Last year, Fortune magazine, the big business magazine, every May has an issue devoted to the Fortune 500, the top 500 corporations. And the one last May was really pretty impressive. I mean, they couldn't get over how fantastic it was. Fourth straight year of double-digit profit growth, 54% profit growth last year. They expect it to continue after 4 years of it. So the country is just flooded with capital. It's not lean and mean or anything like that. Absolutely flooded with capital, more and more narrowly concentrated, while for most of the population it's either stagnation or decline. Well, layoffs is one aspect of that happens to be hitting the newspapers now, but it's a pretty small aspect of the whole picture. Well, that's, these are the results of very definite social policy, back starting in the early 70s. Pretty powerful new weapons were placed into the hands of private tyrannies, what we call private business, which are just big totalitarian institutions, basically unaccountable ones, and they got a lot of new weapons to beat people over the head with. And the main one being the huge explosion of financial markets, which has just been extraordinary in scale. And that's had an enormous effect. I mean, I'll give you some of the numbers if you like. They're really mind-boggling. The effects were already understood by the late 70s, pretty well understood, that this was going to drive down growth rates, concentrate wealth, lead to a kind of low-wage, low-growth, high-profit equilibrium. But that's only part of it. Another aspect of it is that there is now tremendous pressure from financial markets, big money managers, who have huge amounts of capital in their hands and can move it around very fast. One effect of contemporary telecommunications is you can take, say, the whole New York banking system and put it in Tokyo every day, so you can use the financial markets over there and make a little more money, and then use them over here and make a little more money. I mean, that's why you have take, say, MIT, science engineering school. There are corporate recruiters who come around every, May, June to try to pick up the smart guys in the science and engineering, the PhDs. Last year, 25% of them were from Wall Street, corporate recruiters. They were going after math and physics PhDs. These guys don't know anything about Wall Street, but they're smart guys who know how to work out complicated scams that'll enable you to get a tiny bit more profit by, some intricate device in speculative markets. That's having a huge effect on the international economy and the domestic economy. For example, it's forcing corporations to move toward, say, a manager, a guy who's doing the actual, the guys in a management position in a corporation, let's say the CEO or the guys on the board of directors. It's forcing them to look for very short-term profit. Because if they don't go for very short-term profit, there's going to be a rapid exit of capital to somewhere else which is getting short-term profit. And that's having I don't think anybody's worked it out yet, but there's a general assessment that this is having a very harmful effect on the economy altogether. Just as the rapid transfer of the enormous growth of capital that's used for speculation against currencies is also having a tremendous effect. It moves towards, it attacks any country, even a big country like the United States that tried to introduce stimulative measures. Capital would flow out of it really fast because this capital does not want growth. What they want is stable currencies, and growth can threaten stable currencies. So they want low growth, stable currencies, no inflation, tremendous profits, and wages going down. And at home, you're getting pressures against, private enterprise never does much long-term planning, but whatever there is, there's pressure against it because you want to make sure that you have high profits the next quarter, or else you're going to lose the capital that can move around very fast now. So these things are having big effects. And they started around the early 70s and have been expanding ever since. And there are others, what they call globalization, there's been a considerable escalation of transnationals and so on and so forth, and in different ways than in the past. They're doing different things than they used to do. They've always been around. All of these are putting very powerful weapons into the hands of private power, and they're using it to try to unravel the social contract that has been established after lots of struggle. Big attack on labor, incidentally, is part of it. So in the United States, as you know, unionization has gone way down, but it isn't, a large part of that is, I don't like the term conspiracy, and I don't use it much, but this is real conspiracy. There was a state corporate conspiracy in the 80s, very blatant state corporate conspiracy to destroy unions. Now, corporations have always wanted to destroy unions, but state power in the 80s essentially authorized it, and pretty openly. The only place where I've seen really good reviews of this is in the business press, which are very frank about it. Business Week, for example, had very good stories about it. How the government basically told the private sector from the early 80s, they're simply not going to enforce the laws. So do what you like, And in fact, the number of illegal firings of organizers shot up. I think it went up by like a factor of 6 or something. Corporations were told that OSHA, the Safety and Health, or Office of Safety and Health, something or other, the government office that looks after safety and health standards, would simply not enforce standards. And in fact, the number of days, the number of working days lost to injury went up by about 50% very quickly. And that's across the board. Illegal firings, the use of, it has been technically legal in the United States since the late 30s to use permanent replacement workers. The United States may be one of the few industrial countries where this is even on the books, but it's after the Wagner Act was passed in 1935, which for the first time gave workers the right to organize that they had in just about every other industrial country. The Supreme Court very quickly undercut it within a few years and technically allowed the right to hire permanent replacement workers, which is much worse than scabs, notice. But the balance of forces was